So the story I'm going to read for you today is from the autobiography of a formerly enslaved man named Samuel Ringgold Ward. And Samuel recounts the story of how his parents escaped with him when he was just a child. What was the precise sensation produced by the departure of my parents in the minds of their owners? How they bore it, how submissively they spoke of it, how thoughtfully they followed us with their best wishes, and so forth? I have no means of knowing. Information on these questionable topics was never conveyed to us in any definite, systematic form. Be this as it may, on a certain evening, without previous notice, my mother took her child in her arms and stealthily, with palpitating heart, but unfaltering step and undaunted courage, passed the door, the outer gate, the adjoining court, crossed the field, and soon after, followed by my father, left the place of their former abode, bidding it adieu forever. I know not their route, but in those days the track of the fugitive was neither so accurately scented nor so hotly pursued by humans, and so the scent of kindred bloodhounds as now, nor was a slave catching so complete and regular a system as it is now. Occasionally, a slave escaped, but seldom in such numbers as to make it needful either to watch them very closely when at home or to trace them systematically when gone. Indeed, our slave-catching professionals may thank the slaves for their means by which they earned their dishonorable subsistence. For if the latter had never reduced running away to system, the former had never been needed, and therefore never employed at their present wretched occupation. As a system, 'tis an ill wind that blows nobody good. At the time of my parents' escape, it was not always necessary to go to Canada. They therefore did as the few men who then escaped mostly did, aim for a free state and settle among the Quakers. This honored sect, unlike any other in the world, in this respect, was regarded as the slave's friend. This peculiarity of their religion they not only held, but so practiced that it impressed itself on the ready mind of the poor victim of American tyranny. To reach a free state and to live among Quakers were among the highest ideas of those fugitives. Accordingly, obtaining the best directions they could, they set out for Cumberland County in the state of New Jersey, where they had learned slavery did not exist. Quakers lived in numbers who would afford the escaped any and every protection consistent with their peculiar tenets, and where a number of blacks lived, who in cases of emergency could and would make common cause with and for each other. Then these attractions of Cumberland were sufficient to determine their course. I do not think the journey could have been a very long one, but it must be traveled on foot, in some peril, and with small scanty means, next to nothing, and with the burden, though they felt it not, of a child nearly 3 years old, both too young and too weakly to perform his own part of the journey. One child they had laid in the grave. Now their only one must be rescued from a fate worse than 10,000 deaths. Upon this rescue depended their continued enjoyment of each other's society. The many past evils inseparable from a life of slavery, their recently threatened separation, and the dangers of this exodus served to heighten that enjoyment, and doubly to endear each to the other. And the thought that they might at length be successful, and as free husband and wife bring up their child in the nurture of the Lord, according to the best of their ability, stimulated them to fresh courage and renewed endurance. Step by step, day after day, and night after night, with their infant charge passed alternately from the arms of one to those of the other, they wended their way, driven by slavery, drawn and stimulated by the hope of freedom, and all the while trusting in and committing themselves to Him who is God of the oppressed. I can just remember one or two incidents of the journey. They now stand before me, associated with my earliest recollections of the maternal tenderness and paternal care, and it seems to me, now that they are both gathered with the dead, that I would rather forget any facts of my childhood than those connected with that, to me, in more respects than one all-important journey. Struggling against many obstacles, and by God's help surmounting them, they made good progress until they got a little more than midway on their journey. when they were overtaken and ordered back by a young man on horseback, who it seems lived in the neighborhood of my father's master. The youth had a whip and some other insignia of slaveholding authority, and knowing that these slaves had been accustomed from childhood to obey the commanding voice of the white man, young or old, he foolishly fancied that my parents would give up the pursuit of freedom for themselves and their child at his bidding. They thought otherwise, and when he dismounted for the purpose of enforcing authority and compelling obedience by the use of the whip, he received so severe a flogging at the hands of my parents as sent him home nearly a cripple. He conveyed word as to our flight, but prudently said he received his hurts by his horse plunging and throwing him suddenly against a large tree. Through this young man, our owners got at the bottom of their loss. There was the loss of the price of my mother, the loss of my present and prospective self, and what they had no reason before to suspect, the loss of my father. Some say it was the commencement of a series of adversities from which neither the estate nor the owners ever afterwards recovered. I confess to sufficient selfishness never to have shed a tear, either upon hearing this or in the subsequent reflections on it.